My name is Chinwe Ifejika Speranza. I'm a professor of Geography and Sustainable Development, and I work at the Institute of Geography, University of Bern in Switzerland. So within the food security program of the Swiss National Science Foundation, I'm a co-PI in one of the projects on food system sustainability in West Africa in terms of food sustainability, because in many areas of West Africa, we don't produce enough food for own consumption, for example, for internal consumption. So a lot is being imported. If we think in terms of food sustainability, it's quite a complex concept, so to say, because we're talking about food systems. So first of all, we have to think in terms of food systems, and that means bringing all the aspects of food system from production to consumption together. And then you also have to think of the various actors that are active in the food system. So it's not only the farmer or the retailer that is selling the food or the consumer, but also you have to think in terms of gender perspectives. So in terms of sustainability, is the ability of a particular food system of focus to produce for current generations, producing healthy and nutritious food for current generations, while at the same time not having adverse effects on the environment, and also thinking about the future generation, that we can also have an environment where they can produce their own food. If you think in terms of the SDGs and think about food, I think food covers many aspects of the SDGs, from no poverty to climate action or life on land. So it's really a complex topic to look at, but it's very important because many things are interconnected. So in the food system sustainability project, we examine or analyze what strategies or policy measures can be used to improve the situation of individual actors, be they farmers, consumers, processors, in terms of promoting their food sustainability. So this could take various forms. It could be, from the farm plot, looking at farm management practices, land management practices, seed diversity, what the farmers grow, how they grow them. Or it could also be about processing, whether, people that are into the food processing aspect of the food value chain, whether they have enough resources, enough knowledge to process the food in such a way that it is nutritious and safe for consumption, and also that all the actors in the food system, that they earn adequate incomes from their activities in the food systems, especially also thinking in terms of from a gender equality perspective, what that means for women, what it means for men. And we also look at the coexistence between food systems, because food systems, they don't exist in isolation. So in our particular case, we looked at agro-industrial food systems in Kenya and in Bolivia, and their modes of production, what it means for the environment, the environmental performance, that means the impact on the environment. We also looked at agroecological food production systems, and also we looked at regional food production systems, for example, wheat production in Kenya, because it's mainly focusing on wheat production for the Kenyan and East African market, and not that international. And of course, livestock, because livestock production systems or livestock food systems is also a major part of the agricultural system in Kenya. So what people eat, I think traditionally, for many Nigerians or many West Africans, many Ghanaians, if they don't eat yam, then they have not eaten food, or if they haven't eaten fufu, that is, yam that is mashed, or cassava that is mashed, at least once a day, then they haven't eaten food. So these are the major foods of West Africa. That is yam, that is cassava. Maize also plays a role, but we also have rice, which is increasingly becoming a big part of the menu of many families, especially in urban areas. And of course, we have in West Africa, root crops are very important. So the root crops, I mentioned cassava. Nigeria is one of the if not the largest producer of cassava, and yams and cocoyam we also have, but these are kind of like neglected crops because if you look at internationally, people don't talk about yams or cocoyams and so on. It's more about wheat, and of course wheat is also playing a major role in terms of the bread industry, the baking industry, because a lot of wheat is imported. It's not something that is produced that much in West Africa, so much of the bread that you eat is imported wheat. And what the governments have done is, for instance, the Nigerian government, what it has done is to stipulate that a certain percentage of the flour that is used for producing bread, that it should be from cassava. So also people need to get used to it, but actually it also tastes good and people have been eating it for a long time. You know, sometimes even without knowing, but when they know it's cassava, then there is a certain kind of like barrier, but with time, then I think it should be increased because this is what the region produces, and it should play also a major part in the region's food basket or menu. Yeah. What is also important to mention is sorghum and millet, because these are very important crops in the Sahel savanna zones of West Africa. So it feeds millions of people, and these are crops that can also replace wheat to a certain extent, but they have not come up to that extent that they could also be used as a replacement. And if we think in terms of vegetables, we have a lot of vegetables in West Africa, and these are also being consumed and produced, but not a lot of research has been done on these vegetables, as well as even on the indigenous crops or traditional crops, like I was saying, like cassava, yam, cocoyam. And this is important because these are what feed the people, the population, the large population that we have in West Africa, and of course, in addition to millet and sorghum. And in case of vegetables, we have a lot of them. So looking at agriculture, support for agricultural technology and innovation, looking at it closely, one will see that most of the support has been given to export crops. Export crops in terms of cocoa, in terms of palm oil in the past, and not much focus was given to these traditional or staple crops on which the local populations depend on. So yam, cassava, beans, maize, and with that has changed a bit with time. Many studies are now being conducted on cassava, being conducted on yam, but also on rice, because rice is becoming or has become an important crop. It is not to say that rice, we did not have traditional rice in West Africa, but with time, the government, seeing that a lot of rice is being imported, have now focused their attention on how to support local production of rice, which is what is now going on in many West African countries.
How do you see the potential of research for development for the sustainability of food systems?
We need innovations in the food systems, and innovations, they come mainly from research, but not only, they also come from practice. We have to think in terms of transformative research. So transformative research that provides solutions, that provides ideas on how to move the food system more towards food sustainability. And in that sense, of course, it's important to do your laboratory research. It's important to use your laptop and do your research or do literature review. But at the end of the day, it's important that also that people that you expect to take up the results of your research, that are involved in what you're doing. So that is why we argue for a transdisciplinary approach where you engage with the various stakeholders to co-design the challenges or the problems, the research problem that is being addressed, and also maybe a formative evaluation where you engage with them periodically in the course of the research, and not just towards the end or at the end of your research, then you just bring the research results and you expect them to adopt it. So we argue that it is better to engage periodically with the stakeholders, with the actors, so that at the end of the research, they are already part of that process. They have brought in their ideas, they have brought in their perspectives, and then the likelihood is higher that they will then adopt the results of that research. So this is very important. In addition, what we think is important is also not just to engage only with farmers, but to engage with various actors in the food value chain, because it's not just about producing the food in the farm, it's also about processing it. It's about storing it in a good way so that at least the harvest can last for a particular period of time. And in that sense, that means that you need a multi-stakeholder approach where you engage with these various stakeholders, but of course not all at the same time, because it can get quite complex, because we're dealing with a complex system anyway. Yeah.
What if everything goes right? So we do the right steps here in Nigeria or West Africa, and in 20 years, how would it be? And the other scenario would be that we don't do things as we should to make food systems more sustainable. What is the worst case scenario? Taking into account that we have demographic explosion and land degradation at the same time.
I think first of all, we need to understand the context of the West African countries. If land is not being managed in an environmentally friendly way or in a way that is sustainable, then that land will not be able to feed that growing population. So adoption of sustainable land management practices will be one strategy to be able to feed the growing population. That is one. And we need to professionalize farming. But professionalizing farming does not mean that you don't adopt sustainable land management practices, but professionalizing farming in the sense that farmers become informed, that they are informed about innovations, that research or science also take on the local and indigenous knowledge, also in a respectful manner where everyone benefits from this knowledge, science, as well as the local indigenous populations, because they also have these technologies themselves. If not, they will not be there anyway. So technologies, local technologies that have stood the test of time should be adopted also by science and looked into, and how to, maybe build it up further. So in that sense, I've talked about, environmental land, sustainable land management practices as a way to ensure that, we reduce land degradation and try to produce adequate food for the growing population. But then at the same time, we need to explore strategies of how to reduce the population. And then third, we need also to look at how to support the farmers that we have. The farmers that are there, they are very interested in technologies and innovations, but access to these innovations is very difficult. The extension services are not that effective as they used to be, because the extension services is also underfunded, and that is a fundamental problem in many West African countries.